Today's scripture is from John 5, 1 through 18. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem by the sheep gate there was a pool called in Hebrew Bethesda, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there for a very long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is a Sabbath, it is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is this man who said to you, 'Take it up and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd that was there. Later Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I am working." For this reason the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God. This is the word of the Lord.
Well, good morning again, friends. As I said earlier, my name is Taylor. I'm one of the pastors here, and it is just truly an honor to be with you in worship this morning. Wanted to lift something up. I told you earlier we were going to celebrate in something. Later on this morning at the 9:45 and 11 o'clock, we have 4 baptisms. And so that is just a really cool thing, something to celebrate and be excited about. Yeah, Bill's up here clapping. That's a good thing as a pastor. If you get 1 baptism in a morning, you're doing pretty good. You get 2, it's like, all right, we're having a good morning. You get to 4, you're hitting a kind of a party. It's a good deal. So just wanted to celebrate that with you this morning. As we mentioned earlier in the video, we are in need of some help with the service at the 9:30 and 9:45. But in all reality, we encourage you to serve in any service. That includes the 8:30 here, the 9:30 or 9:45, and an 11 o'clock. It's just a wonderful opportunity. We encourage you to go to a worship service and then maybe serve at another, whether that's helping to collect the offering, or maybe that is greeting and handing out bulletins at the beginning, helping serve communion. We would just love for you to be a part of that. So I encourage you to stop out of the information center after the service and get more information about how you can help and on what Sunday. And today we are continuing in the Gospel of John, and that is our summer series. And the final Sunday, this is something exciting. I kind of talked with Bob about it as almost a little bit of a joke. I was kind of goofing around, and then it turned into something that turned into a really cool idea. And so for the 4th Sunday of every month, after the 11 o'clock service, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be serving some lunch. And since it's the Gospel of John series, I told him, you know what we should do? We should have Jimmy John's, and Taco John's, and Papa John's. And so we're going to do that. So the 4th Sunday of every month after the 11 o'clock service, we encourage you to stop by, have some lunch, and join in some fellowship and community and some really good food. As maybe it's an opportunity to talk about the sermon that morning or just what's going on in your lives. And just really, really excited to see that actually happening. What started out as just kind of playful banter turned into a really cool idea, I think. So as we continue on into the summer series of the Gospel of John, just want to remind you of where we've been the last couple weeks. Bob has talked to us. First, Jesus invited people to come and see what he was doing, and we too are to invite others to come and see what the Lord is doing through our lives. And last week he talked about living water, where Jesus was talking with a Samaritan woman and saying, if I were the one giving you water, you would never be thirsty again. So Jesus is beginning to expand our minds a little bit, asking us to step outside of our normal views of how we think about things. And today we're going to start, we're looking into John chapter 5, verses 1 through 18. And this is about the miracle of Jesus healing on the Sabbath. Now, there are two main parts of this story, and that's pre-miracle and post-miracle. So just to give you a little context of that day, so that will set us up for this story. Like we said last week, Jesus was talking to the Samaritan woman, and it was completely against the norms and the regulations of that day for Jesus, a Jew, to be talking to a Samaritan woman. Now remember that's going to be on the quiz a little later today, that Jesus was stepping outside of norms and regulations. But Jesus had also just finished healing an official's son, and people were beginning to hear about the miracles done by this man named Jesus. And now finally, the Bethzatha, or Bethesda, as it was also called, is a healing pool. And according to traditional text, an angel would come down and stir the pool and stir it up, kind of almost looking like a hot tub a little bit. I don't know about you. I really like hot tubs when you turn the jets on and you get everything bubbling and it kind of has that cool effect. Now, one of my favorite things to do, this is a little weird, but anybody else like to find a jet and put their finger in and just kind of plug up the jet and feel that pressure? Nope, I'm the only weird one in this church this morning. Okay, excellent. But that's kind of what it would look like. This angel would come down and stir up this pool, and then whoever would enter into it first would be healed of their illness or their disease, and they would be made well. And so enter Jesus, who approaches this man who had been sick for 38 years. Now that is a long, long, long time to be sick. If you're talking in terms of being sick, 38 years for some of us, maybe we want to say that wasn't such a long time, and if so, you know what? It is just yesterday. But in terms of being sick, we're looking at a very, very, very long time. And Jesus knew this. Jesus knew what needed to be healed when he entered in and he saw this man. And I think we take for granted, and we often don't make enough of Jesus' infinite wisdom, knowing far beyond our own understanding and just being able to walk in and know that this man needs to be healed. And so he asked this man, do you want to be healed? And it seems to me that would be kind of an obvious answer after being sick for 38 years. Yes, of course, this man would want to be healed. Wouldn't we all? And yet, instead of saying yes, he starts giving excuses. Well, Jesus, this is why this is why I'm not well. This is why I'm still this way. And he begins talking about in verse 7. He gives us the exact reason. He said, the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is being stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me. So he's given his reasons as to why he's not well. And at first I was honestly completely perplexed by this answer, by what this man had to say. Why would you give an excuse? Jesus is simply asking, do you want to be healed? He's not even providing necessarily a way that it's going to happen when he asks the question. He just says, are you wanting to be healed? And he gives an excuse. But when you think about it, it has a lot to do with our humanistic resistance to change. You see, this man was so comfortable in where he was, not because his sickness was good, but it was because it's what he knew. He was so comfortable in that, and he was maybe even scared of what change would bring. He was scared of what that next step was. And you see, I think too often we're so comfortable and so uncomfortable with change is that we won't even let Jesus heal us. We give excuses as to why our heart is the same instead of answering yes to the call of Christ. But hear this isn't coming from a place of condemnation, not by any means. If anything, it comes from a place of confession, because I know I too have done this. Most of you know, last summer I had a pretty major medical procedure done at the age of 24 at the time. I had a major infection going through my mouth and ended up having to have all of my teeth removed. And it was a very, very hard procedure to go through. It was a very difficult time from the beginning of figuring out that's what was causing some pretty bad headaches and some pain. And I wasn't functioning right. I just didn't feel like myself. And so I started seeing doctors and trying to figure out what was going on, and finally ended up figuring out that's what it was. But people ask me, what was the most difficult part of all of that? What was the most difficult part of walking through that? And Many would think it was the procedure itself. It was a 4.5-hour procedure, and it was difficult. You just imagine having everything removed as 24 years old. But that wasn't honestly the hardest part. And no, not even the hardest part was the weeks following when the swelling happened and I looked like a chipmunk, and all my friends who had their wisdom teeth taken out, I said, "You got nothing on me anymore." I was swollen, I was in pain, I was uncomfortable. But you know what? That wasn't even the most difficult part. The most difficult part for me was understanding that I could not change this on my own, that I needed to be healed, and it was admitting that I needed to go somewhere else to do that. That also applies to our faith life. I think too often we'll be in some sort of pain. There will be something going on, and we'll think, you know what, maybe I can just ride this out. Maybe I'm good to go, but then a year passes. 5 years pass. 38 years pass. But here's Jesus asking us, do you want to be healed? So what are we saying this day? Are we giving excuses as to why our heart is the way it is? Are we giving excuses as to why we don't answer the call? But luckily enough for us, even when we provide excuses, Christ still provides solutions. Jesus provides this solution to this man, which is pretty simply stand up, take your mat, and walk. And so he does. After 38 years of being sick, this man has been made well. Now this leads us to the second part of this story, the post-miracle, which is just as important, if not more important, than the pre-miracle. Take up your mat and walk. Taking up your mat was considered a sign of Sabbath. Now, I don't know, it was against Sabbath. It was a sign of work. It was carrying a burden. Now, I don't know about any of you, but if a law official came up to me and said, no, it's Sunday. You don't have to work. Put your mat down. Take off your robe. Go ahead and go home. Sit on the couch. I'd be like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. But thinking about the laws of Sabbath, there were multiple laws against doing anything on the Sabbath day, to the point where they had laws that you couldn't climb a tree because you might pick fruit, and that was considered work. You could definitely walk, but not too far, because if you walk too far, that would be considered work. And so there were lots of restrictions on the Sabbath. Now, I'm not saying that through this scripture we're to not honor the Sabbath. But Jesus said in Luke chapter 3, verse 4, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath? To save life or to kill? So Jesus is challenging us what it means to Sabbath. What does this day truly mean? But Jesus is saying is something far more important than these laws and restrictions, and that is that the work of the Father is at hand. And Jesus is challenging them to think more eternally. We need to get beyond our own thoughts and visions and start to focus in on God's vision and God's work. Pastor Rick Warren, I think, put it very well when he said it's about getting in on what God is doing in the world and being part of where He has placed you. You see, God's vision in this is healing. See, you are made well. It's personal devotion and holiness when Jesus says to the man, do not sin anymore because you have been made well. It's about grace and mercy, and Jesus tells us, I don't want your sacrifices. I don't want your rules and regulations. I want you to learn mercy. So what is the work of Christ that we are called to continue? Paul reminds us in Philippians it's to imitate Christ's humility. He says, let the same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. And then he goes on to say, therefore, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed me, not only in my presence, but much more now in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And listen to this, for it is God who is at work in you, enabling you to both will and to work for His good pleasure. So we are to work. That's what this is saying, that we are to work. Take up your mat As healed people, we are called to work and to go and show the world that we'll continue working just as Christ. That even when the work is hard, we will take up our mat. Even when someone tries to show us that love is dead in violent acts, such as what was carried out in Orlando, no, we will work and show that God is still at hand. Even when we are tired, we will work to show that the Lord is still working in this place, that God is not finished with us. Even when people persecute us, just as they did with Jesus, they knew that he was breaking the Sabbath laws, and yet Jesus said, "This is my Father's work. He is not done, and neither am I." But when Jesus says to this man, "Take up your mat," he's not just inviting us to any old, plain old work. He's inviting us into his work with him. So we, friends, are to take up our mat because we have been healed through Christ. So I invite you this day, say yes to being healed. When that question comes, let us no longer give the excuses as to why for 38 years we haven't been put into the pool, but instead answer the call to Christ. And let us take up our mat and walk. Let's be part of the healing work in this world. Can I pray for you this morning? Gracious God, we are so grateful for your word. We are thankful for your presence and your gift of love. We are thankful for your healing. And God, too often, we'll give excuses. Too often, we're so willing to sit at the side of the pool for 38 years, and then when the chance comes, we're still giving excuses as to why not. But Lord, where you work, where we provide excuses, you provide solutions. So God, move through us. Give us the strength to pick up our mats. Give us the courage to do so and walk in your light and your love and your healing power so that we can continue the work of Christ this day. We pray this all in the name of your Son. Amen.